The lights in the great chamber dimmed as the last speaker finished their statement. Ambassador Lee Tae-ho sat in his chair, watching the alien faces around him. Some looked nervous. Others looked angry. A few wouldn't meet his eyes at all. He had been coming to these meetings for 12 years now. 12 years of sitting in this same spot, listening to complaints and fixing problems that threatened to tear the galaxy apart. 12 years of keeping the peace when everyone else wanted war. The chamber was huge, built like a giant circle with seats rising up in layers. Representatives from every major species in the galaxy sat here. The Vrex with their red skin and sharp teeth. The tall blue Kalari with their long necks. The rock-like Thornians who barely moved when they spoke. The crystal beings from the outer rim who glowed softly in the dim light. And humans. Just humans. Lee Tae-ho and his small team of advisors sitting in a section that seemed too small for the weight they carried in galactic affairs. Chancellor Vextar of the Vrex Empire stood up. His red skin looked darker than usual under the chamber lights. When he spoke, his voice carried across the silent room like thunder. For too long we have allowed one species to hold too much power over all others, he said. His sharp teeth showed when he talked. The humans control our trade routes. They decide our disputes. They tell us when we can fight and when we cannot. This is not the way of equals. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Lee Tae-ho kept his face calm, but inside he felt something cold settling in his stomach. He had heard whispers for months now. Secret meetings between species who had never agreed on anything before. Quiet conversations that stopped when humans walked by. The crystalline hegemony's representative, a being that looked like living diamond, began to glow brighter. The human military presence in our space has grown beyond acceptable limits, it said in a voice like wind chimes. They patrol our borders. They watch our movements. They have become the galaxy's self-appointed police force. Lee Tae-ho almost laughed, but he caught himself. Police force? They had been asked to patrol those borders, begged to stop the conflicts that had raged for centuries before humans ever left their home system. Every trade route they protected had been opened at the request of the species who now complained about their presence. More voices joined in. The Thornian representative, a massive being made of living rock, spoke slowly. Human interference in our mining disputes has cost us billions of credits. They favor the smaller species over established powers. They have prevented us from reclaiming our rightful territories, added a speaker from the aquatic collective. One by one, the complaints came. Humans were too involved. Humans were too powerful. Humans made decisions that affected everyone without asking permission first. It was all true, Lee Tae-ho thought, because every time they had asked permission first, nothing got done, and people died while the council argued. He remembered the Kalari-Thornian War 15 years ago. 3 billion dead in the first month. The council had debated for 6 weeks about whether to intervene while entire worlds burned. When the human fleet finally arrived without waiting for permission, they stopped the war in 8 days. The same Kalari and Thornian representatives who now complained about human interference had sent grateful messages for years afterward. Chancellor Vexatar spoke again. Today, we vote on Resolution 2847. All human military forces will be withdrawn from non-human space within 6 months. All human peacekeeping operations will cease immediately. All human weapons and military technology will be turned over to galactic oversight for safekeeping. The cold feeling in Lee Tae-ho's stomach spread to his chest. They weren't just asking humans to step back. They were asking them to become defenseless. Furthermore, Vextar continued, human involvement in trade disputes, territorial disagreements, and interspecies conflicts is hereby terminated. The galaxy will govern itself without human interference. The chamber erupted in noise. Some species cheered. Others shouted objections. The smaller species, the ones who depended on human protection, looked terrified. Li Tae-ho saw fear in their eyes. They knew what would happen to them when the bigger species no longer had humans to worry about. The vote began. Names were called. Responses echoed through the chamber. The Vrex Empire voted yes. The Crystalline Hegemony voted yes. The Thornian Republic voted yes. One by one, the major powers lined up to strip humanity of its role in galactic affairs. Some voted no. The small mining colonies that humans had protected from raiders. The peaceful farming worlds that depended on human-mediated trade agreements. The research stations that existed only because human ships kept the space around them safe. Their voices seemed tiny in the massive chamber. Li Tae-ho watched the numbers appear on the display above the chamber floor. The count climbed steadily. 800 votes for the resolution. 820, 840. When the final tally appeared, the chamber fell silent. 847 votes in favor, 12 votes against. Only humanity and 11 small species had voted to maintain the current system. Li Tae-ho stood slowly. Every eye in the chamber turned to him. He had given speeches here before, passionate arguments for peace, detailed explanations of why certain actions were necessary. Today, he spoke only 23 words. Very well. If the galaxy no longer requires our services, we shall withdraw them entirely. The silence that followed was different from before. It felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Chancellor Vextar looked confused. This wasn't the response they had expected. They had thought humans would argue, would bargain, would try to find some compromise that let them keep some of their influence. Li Tae-ho gathered his papers and walked toward the exit. His advisors followed without a word. Behind them, the chamber remained silent. No one seemed to know what to say. As they reached the door, Li Tae-ho turned back one last time. We came here 3 centuries ago because you asked for our help. We stayed because you needed our help. Now you have voted to refuse our help. We will respect your decision. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. In the corridor outside, his advisors finally spoke. Sir, surely they don't mean... They mean exactly what they voted for, Li Tae-ho said quietly. Send the message to Earth. Full withdrawal. All personnel, all ships, all aid stations, everything. But sir, the consequences... Li Tae-ho stopped, walking, and looked at his aide. The consequences, Lieutenant Park, are no longer our responsibility. The galaxy has spoken. They want to govern themselves. Let them. As they walked through the station corridors toward their ship, Li Tae-ho thought about the vote count. 847 to 12. The same species they had saved from extinction. The same worlds they had rebuilt after wars. The same trade routes they had kept safe for generations. All of it voted away in a single afternoon. The galaxy wanted to be free of human interference. Starting tomorrow, they would get exactly what they asked for. Colonel Choi Min-ho stood on the observation deck of the human base, watching the morning sun rise over Kepler 7. The planet was beautiful, with its purple grass and silver trees that moved without wind. He had been stationed here for 4 years, keeping the peace between 2 species who hated each other more than anything else in the galaxy. Today was his last day. Behind him, soldiers packed equipment into transport containers. Medical supplies, communication gear, weapons, food stores, everything that had kept the 47th Peacekeeping Battalion running for years. The base that had been their home was being emptied, box by box. Sir, the Kalari delegation is here again, said Sergeant Lim Dami, stepping up beside him. She looked tired. They all looked tired these days. Through the window, Choi could see the group of tall, blue-skinned beings waiting by the main gate. Elder Vixtar stood at the front, his long neck bent with worry. They had been coming every day for a week, ever since the withdrawal order arrived from Earth. Let them in, Choi said quietly. 5 minutes later, Elder Vixtar stood in the base commander's office. His usually proud posture was gone, replaced by something that looked like panic. Behind him, two other Kalari elders waited nervously. "Colonel Choi, please," Vixtar began, his voice shaking slightly. "You must reconsider. Our people and the Thornians cannot exist on the same world without your presence. You know this." Choi did know this. The Kalari and Thornians had been fighting over Kepler-7 for 60 years before humans arrived. Both species needed the planet's rare minerals. Both species claimed it was their ancestral home. Without human peacekeepers to patrol the border, zones, to mediate disputes, to stop small fights from becoming large wars, they would go back to killing each other within days. "I understand your concern, Elder," Choi said carefully. "But the Galactic Council has voted. Humanity is no longer welcome as peacekeepers." "The Council made a mistake." Vixtar's voice rose, his usual calm breaking apart. "They did not think about places like this. They only thought about their own fear of human power." Another Kalari elder stepped forward. "Our children play in the neutral zones you created. Our merchants trade in the markets you protect. If you leave, all of this ends. We will be at war again before the next moon rises." Choi felt something heavy settle in his chest. These beings were right, and he knew it. The Kalari and Thornians had lived in peace for 4 years because human soldiers patrolled the disputed areas. Human medics treated both species in the same. Hospitals. Human judges settled arguments before they became blood feuds. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "The orders come from Earth Central Command. All peacekeeping operations must cease immediately." Through the office window, he could see Thornian vehicles approaching the base. The rock-like beings moved slowly, but Choi knew they were just as worried as the Kalari. Captain Ryu Solbin had told him about her meeting with Thornian leaders yesterday. They had actually cried, if Thornians could cry. Their stone faces had cracked with stress. "You don't understand," Vixtar said desperately. "Without you here, we will destroy each other within a single cycle. Then the Council will blame us for the violence. They will say we could not govern ourselves, but they will never blame themselves for forcing you to leave." The truth of those words hit Choi like a physical blow. The Council members who had voted to remove human peacekeepers would never take responsibility for what happened next. When the killing started again, they would shake their heads sadly and talk about how some species just couldn't learn to live in peace. A comm unit on Choi's desk beeped softly. "Sir, transport ships are requesting permission to land. They're here for the final evacuation." Choi pressed the comm button. "Permission granted. Begin loading operations." He turned back to the Kalari delegation. "I wish things were different, Elder Vixtar. But the galaxy has spoken. Humanity's help is no longer wanted." "It is wanted here," Vixtar said quietly. "It is needed here." Then, the Council should have thought about that before they voted. Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening on hundreds of worlds. Dr. Yoon So-ra shut down the human medical station on Rigel Prime, watching families who had depended on human doctors for years. Some of the alien children had never seen any medic except humans. Now they would have to hope their own species would care for them. "Please, doctor," begged the aquatic collective citizen, her gills fluttering with distress. "My spawn child needs the medicine only humans can provide. Our own healers do not have this knowledge." Dr. Yoon's hands shook as she packed the last of the medical supplies. "I'm sorry. I cannot leave any equipment or medicine behind. Council regulations are very clear." The medical station had served 12 different species for 8 years. Human. Doctors had developed new treatments for diseases that affected multiple alien biologies. They had saved thousands of lives and prevented 3 separate plague outbreaks. All of that knowledge was walking away in transport containers. On the trade station, Babylon 7, Commander Han Bo-ram supervised the withdrawal of the Human Customs Office. For 15 years, humans had managed trade disputes between 6 different species. They had prevented wars over shipping routes, settled arguments about cargo rights, and stopped merchant conflicts from becoming diplomatic disasters. "Commander, please," said Trade Representative Clicks from the insectoid swarm. "Without human oversight, the V-Rex Empire will claim exclusive rights to the Outer Rim shipping lanes. They are already moving warships into position." "That is no longer our concern," Han replied, though the words felt like poison in her mouth. "But they will cut off food shipments to our colonies. Millions will starve." Han stopped packing for a moment. She had seen the Vrex fleet movements, too. 3 battle groups moving toward key trade routes, positioning themselves to control shipping the moment humans were gone. The same Vrex who had voted to remove human peacekeepers were already preparing to exploit the chaos that would follow. "I suggest you contact the Galactic Council," she said finally. "Request mediation through proper channels." Clix's compound eyes reflected her despair. "The Council takes months to reach decisions. My people will be dead before they finish debating." Back on Kepler 7, Colonel Choi watched the last human transport lift off from the planet's surface. The base that had been home to 300 peacekeepers was now empty. Security barriers that had protected thousands of civilians were powered down. Medical stations that had treated both Kalari and Thornian patients were dark and silent. Elder Vixtar stood beside him as the transport disappeared into the sky. "How long do you think we have?" he asked quietly. Choi checked his watch. "The first patrol was scheduled to begin in 2 hours. Without it, incidents will start by evening. Small fights at first. Within 3 days, you'll be at war again." "And Earth will do nothing. Earth will follow the Council's wishes. No interference, no aid, no peacekeeping." Vixtar nodded slowly. "The Council fears human power. Soon they will learn what the galaxy looks like without it." As their ship left Kepler 7's atmosphere, Choi looked down at the planet one last time. The purple grasslands and silver forests looked peaceful from space, but he knew that peace was already beginning to crack. Without human presence, the old hatreds would surface like infection from a barely healed wound. His comm unit buzzed with a message from Earth. "Withdrawal from Kepler 7 confirmed. Proceed to next assignment." There would be no next assignment. The 47th Peacekeeping Battalion was being disbanded. 300 soldiers who had spent years learning how to prevent wars were being sent home, their skills no longer needed. The galaxy had voted for independence from human interference. They were about to get exactly what they asked for. General Kang Hyun-woo stared at the massive display wall in Earth's Strategic Command Center. Red zones spread across the galaxy map like a disease. Each red dot represented a conflict that had erupted in the 6 months since human withdrawal. Each flashing symbol meant worlds at war, trade routes under attack, or diplomatic relations breaking down completely. "Status report," he said to the officer beside him. Intelligence Officer Lim Ye-jin consulted her tablet. Her face looked pale. Under the command center's blue lights. 17 major conflicts in 6 sectors, sir. The Kalari-Thornian War resumed exactly as predicted. Fighting on Kepler 7 has spread to 4 neighboring systems. Kang nodded grimly. Colonel Choi Min-ho had been right about the timeline. 3 days after human withdrawal, the shooting had started again. Now whole fleets were burning in space above worlds that had known peace for years. The Vrex Empire has invaded the Rigel system, the Centaur colonies, and the Outer Rim trading posts, Lim continued. They're claiming ancient territorial rights that haven't been disputed for decades. "Because we were there to keep those disputes settled," Kang muttered. The Vrex had been among the loudest voices calling for human withdrawal. Now, they were taking advantage of the chaos they had helped create. Another officer approached with more reports. "Sir, the crystalline hegemony has cut off all trade agreements with 14 species. Galactic shipping is down 60%. Food shortages are being reported on 43 worlds." Kang watched the red zones multiply on the display. When humans ran galactic peacekeeping, his staff tracked maybe 3 or 4 minor disputes at any time. Most problems were solved before they became real conflicts. Now his screens showed more active wars than he had seen in his entire 30-year career. "Casualty estimates?" he asked quietly. Lim's voice was barely above a whisper. 2 billion across all conflicts, sir. The number is growing daily. 2 billion. Kang closed his eyes for a moment. In the old days, when human peacekeepers intervened, quickly, wars usually ended with casualties in the thousands, not billions. But the galaxy had voted for independence. They had wanted to handle their own problems. "Any requests for assistance?" he asked. 47 official requests, sir. Emergency, aid, medical supplies, peacekeeping forces, diplomatic mediation. The usual list? All denied per Protocol 7? Yes, sir. Protocol 7 had been established the day after the Council vote. No human intervention without formal apology and complete restoration of human authority. The galaxy had to admit they were wrong before humanity would lift a finger to help them. So far, no one had been willing to do that. On the main screen, another red zone appeared. This one was in the core systems, close to the old Galactic Council headquarters. Kang recognized the location immediately. "What's happening at Nexus Prime?" he asked. "The station is under siege, sir. Vrex battleships arrived this morning demanding payment of protection fees from all council members. Several species are refusing to pay. Fighting has broken out in the station corridors." Kang almost smiled, but the deaths involved made it impossible. Nexus Prime was where the Council had voted to remove human protection. Now the very beings who had cast those votes were hiding in emergency shelters while wars raged around them. "Sir," another officer called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Aquatic Collective. They're requesting immediate military intervention to stop Vrex forces from poisoning their ocean worlds." Response? "The same as always, sir. The Galactic Confederation Council has determined that human involvement in galactic affairs is unwelcome. We respect your decision." Kang had heard that response read aloud dozens of times now. It was polite, professional, and completely final. The galaxy had made its choice. Humanity was simply honoring that choice. Former Ambassador Ryu Jin-Ah entered the command center carrying a stack of reports. Since the withdrawal, she had been promoted to Earth's isolationist policy advisor. Her job was to ensure that humanity stayed out of galactic affairs exactly as the Council had demanded. "General, I've reviewed the latest requests," she said, setting the reports on his desk. "The Thornian Republic is offering significant mining rights in exchange for peacekeeping assistance. The Kalari Assembly promises favorable trade agreements. The insectoid swarm is even offering technology sharing. Their answer? All rejected. None of them include the required formal apology or recognition of human authority." Ryu had been against the withdrawal from the beginning. She believed humans had a moral duty to help, regardless of politics. But she also understood that the galaxy needed to learn a lesson. They had to understand what they had thrown away. Any word from the major powers? The Vrex? The crystalline hegemony? Nothing official, though our intelligence suggests they're beginning to regret their votes. The Vrex Empire is facing rebellions in 12 systems they conquered. Turns out occupying worlds is much harder than taking them, especially without human logistical support. That was something the Vrex had never considered. For decades, human ships had handled cargo transport, medical supplies, and communication networks across their empire. Without that infrastructure, their military was struggling to hold territory they had easily captured. "The crystalline hegemony is facing similar problems," Ryu continued. "They cut off trade with everyone, but they never developed their own merchant fleet. Their economy is collapsing because they can't move goods between their own worlds." Kang turned back to the display wall. The red zones were multiplying faster now. As each conflict drew in neighboring species, new wars sparked like fires jumping between buildings. The galaxy was learning what 3 centuries of human peacekeeping had actually prevented. "Sir," "Incoming emergency transmission from the Council," called a communications officer. "Put it through." The main screen changed to show Chancellor Vextar of the Vrex Empire. But this wasn't the proud, arrogant being who had led the vote against humanity 6 months ago. His red skin looked pale, his sharp teeth were stained with blood, and his eyes held desperation. "General Kang, I speak for the Emergency Council of Surviving Species," Vextar began. His voice shook with exhaustion. "The galaxy is burning. Billions are dead. Trade has collapsed. We need human assistance." "I see," Kang replied calmly. "Are you prepared to formally apologize for the Council's actions and restore complete human authority over galactic peacekeeping?" Vextar's face twisted with anger and pride. Even now, facing the destruction of everything he had worked to build, he couldn't bring himself to admit he had been wrong. "We are prepared to negotiate new terms for human involvement," he said finally. "I'm afraid that's not acceptable, Chancellor. The terms are non-negotiable. Complete apology and complete restoration of human authority, or no assistance. You cannot simply watch the galaxy destroy itself." Kang's expression never changed. "Chancellor, 6 months ago your species led a vote to remove humanity from galactic affairs. You stated that human involvement was unwelcome and unnecessary. We are simply respecting your decision. But the consequences are exactly what many humans predicted would happen. We warned the Council. We explained what would occur without human peacekeeping. You chose not to listen." Vexitar's image flickered as explosions rocked his location. "Please, millions more will die." "Then I suggest you convince the surviving Council members to meet our terms," Kang said quietly. "Earth will be waiting when you're ready to formally admit your mistake." The transmission ended. Vextar's desperate face disappeared, replaced by the galaxy map with its spreading red zones. "Sir," Lim said softly, "how long do we let this continue?" Kang looked at the casualty reports, the refugee numbers, the economic collapse data. Everything humans had spent centuries preventing was happening at once. But the lesson had to be learned completely, or it would be forgotten as soon as the immediate crisis passed. "Until they're ready to accept the truth," he said finally. "The galaxy chose independence. They can have it for as long as they want it." On the display wall, another red zone appeared. President O Chang-min stood at the window of Earth's orbital station, watching the ships gather beyond the defense perimeter. Thousands of vessels floated in the darkness of space, their running lights creating a sea of stars that hadn't been there yesterday. Refugee ships mostly, filled with beings whose worlds had been consumed by the wars that now burned across the galaxy. "How many today?" he asked his aide. 3,000 more ships arrived overnight, sir," replied Lieutenant Kim Soo-jin. "Total count is now 47,000 vessels waiting at our borders, estimated population of 200 million refugees." 2 years had passed since the withdrawal. 2 years of watching the galaxy tear itself apart while desperate beings fled to the only safe place they knew, the edge of human space. But Earth's borders remained closed. The defense perimeter held firm. Fleet Admiral Co. Dong-hyun approached with his daily report. His face looked older than his years, lined with the stress of maintaining the quarantine while watching children die just beyond their ability to help. "Sir, we've had 17 attempts to breach the perimeter in the last 24 hours, he said quietly. "All peaceful. Mostly medical emergencies and supply shortages. We've turned them all back per Protocol 7. Protocol 7. The same words that had been repeated thousands of times over the past 2 years. No assistance without formal apology and complete restoration of human authority. The galaxy had to admit they were wrong before humanity would help." "Any official delegations?" the president asked. "Yes, sir. 3 more arrived this morning." Through the station's windows, O could see the diplomatic ships. Sleek vessels that once carried proud ambassadors were now battered and scarred from the journey through war zones. The beings inside had traveled across a burning galaxy to reach Earth's borders. "Send them to Conference Room 7, O said. "I'll see them now." 30 minutes later, President O sat across from 3 alien representatives. He recognized one of them immediately, High Commander Theclon of the Vrex Empire. The same being who had stood beside Chancellor Vextar during the vote 2 years ago. But the proud warrior looked very different now. Theclon's red skin was marked with scars. His uniform was patched and stained. His sharp teeth, once symbols of Vrex strength, were broken and filed down from malnutrition. The mighty Vrex Empire was clearly dying. "President O," Theclon began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I come to you not as a conqueror, but as a survivor. My people are gone." The words hung in the air like a confession. O kept his expression neutral, but inside he felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The Vrex had been among the loudest voices calling for human withdrawal. They had claimed humans were too powerful, too controlling. Now their empire had collapsed under the weight of rebellions they couldn't suppress without human logistics. "I'm sorry to hear that, High Commander," O said carefully. "What assistance are you seeking?" We need help," Theclon said, his pride finally breaking completely. "Food, medical supplies, safe transport for our survivors. We can pay. We can offer mining rights, technology, anything you want." O had heard similar offers dozens of times in the past months. Species that had voted against humanity were now willing to give up everything they owned in exchange for help. But the terms remained the same. "Are you prepared to issue a formal apology for the Council's actions 2 years ago?" O asked. "Are you ready to accept complete human authority over galactic peacekeeping operations?" Theclon's scarred face twisted with the last remnants of his species' famous pride. Even facing extinction, even watching his people die in refugee camps, he couldn't bring himself to say the words that would save them. We could negotiate terms for limited cooperation," he said finally. "I'm afraid that's not acceptable, High Commander. The terms are non-negotiable." The second representative, a being from the Aquatic Collective, leaned forward desperately. Her gills fluttered with stress as she spoke. "President O, please. 50 of our ocean worlds have been poisoned by Vrex weapons. Our children are dying in contaminated water. Surely human compassion was offered for 3 centuries, O interrupted gently. The galaxy voted to reject it. We are simply respecting that decision." The third representative, a crystalline being from the hegemony, began to glow brighter with agitation. "This is madness. You watch billions die when you could save them. With a single command." O stood up slowly. Through the conference room windows, he could see the refugee ships scattered across space like fallen leaves. Each ship held families who had lost everything. Children who had never known war were now learning what the galaxy looked like without human protection. 2 years ago, your government stood in the council chambers and declared that human involvement in galactic affairs was unwelcome, he said quietly. You stated that humanity had become too powerful, too controlling. You voted to force us to withdraw our protection, our aid, our peacekeeping forces. He walked to the window, looking out at the desperate vessels. You got exactly what you voted for. A galaxy free from human interference. The consequences of that vote are not humanity's responsibility. Theclon struggled to his feet, his injured body shaking with effort. But surely you cannot mean to let entire species go extinct over politics. O turned back to face him. High Commander, this isn't about politics. This is about accountability. Your species led the vote to remove human peacekeepers. You celebrated when our forces withdrew. You declared independence from human authority. Now you live with the results of that independence. We were wrong, Theclon shouted, his voice breaking. We admit it! We were fools! But you're not willing to say so officially, O replied calmly. You're not willing to restore human authority completely. You still want to negotiate, to keep some control, to maintain some pride. That means you haven't truly learned the lesson. Cultural Liaison. Young Mi Young entered the conference room, carrying a tablet with the latest reports. She had been one of the few humans advocating for limited aid, arguing that humanity had a moral duty to help regardless of politics. But even she understood why the president maintained the hard line. Sir, we've received formal requests from 43 more species, she said quietly, all offering various payments and concessions, none willing to meet our terms. O nodded. The pattern was always the same. Desperate pleas, offers of wealth and technology, promises of friendship and cooperation, but never the complete admission of error that humanity required. Never the willingness to accept that the galaxy needed human leadership, not human service. There's something else, sir, Young continued. Our monitoring stations report that several species are beginning to form military alliances against each other. The wars are getting bigger. Through the windows, more ships were arriving at the perimeter. The refugee population was growing daily as more worlds fell to violence. Soon there would be more beings in the camps outside human space than remained on their home worlds. How long can we maintain the quarantine? Oh, asked Admiral Seo. Indefinitely, sir. Our defense grid is more than adequate. But the humanitarian situation. He gestured toward the refugee ships. It's getting worse daily. O looked back at the three representatives. They sat in their chairs like broken things, the fight gone out of them. Their species had been among the galaxy's proudest, most powerful civilizations. Now they were beggars at humanity's door. I will make the terms clear one final time, he said. Complete formal apology for the Council's actions. Complete acceptance of human authority over all galactic peacekeeping, trade disputes, and interspecies conflicts. Complete recognition that the galaxy requires human leadership to maintain peace. Accept these terms completely, and assistance begins immediately. And if we refuse? Asked the aquatic representative. O's expression never changed. Then you continue to enjoy the independence you voted for. Earth will remain neutral as the Council demanded. The three representatives looked at each other with defeat in their eyes. They had traveled across a war-torn galaxy hoping to find some compromise, some middle ground that would save their people without completely surrendering their pride. There was no middle ground. Humanity had tried compromise for 3 centuries. The galaxy had rejected it. Now there were only 2 choices, complete submission or complete independence. As the representatives were escorted back to their ships, Young approached the president. Sir, do you really think they'll accept our terms? O looked out at the refugee ships, at the desperate beings who had lost everything because their leaders couldn't admit they were wrong. Eventually, he said quietly, when enough of them die, when the proud species are extinct and only the humble ones remain, when the cost of pride finally becomes too high to pay. And until then, we wait. The galaxy chose this path. They can walk it as long as they have the strength. Another 1,000 ships appeared at the perimeter, their lights joining the desperate constellation of the dispossessed. Supreme Chancellor Bei Sung-ho walked into the rebuilt council chambers on New Geneva Station. The old Nexus Prime had been destroyed in the final battles of the Rex-Kalari War. This new station orbited Earth's moon, a clear symbol of where power now resided in the galaxy. The chamber looked different from the old one. Instead of the circular design where all species sat as equals, this room had a single raised platform at the center. That was where the human representative sat. Everyone else was arranged in rings around them, like planets orbiting a star. 3 years had passed since humanity walked away from galactic affairs. 3 years of wars, refugee crises, economic collapse, and the near extinction of several major species. Finally, the survivors were ready to accept reality. The Galactic Accord is ready for signing, announced Secretary Park Jin-woo, placing the documents on the central podium. The papers represented the complete restructuring of galactic civilization under human authority. Bay looked around the chamber at the assembled representatives. Many faces were missing. Chancellor Vextar of the Vrex Empire was dead, killed in the rebellion that destroyed his homeworld. The crystalline hegemony's leadership had dissolved when their economy collapsed. Half the species that had voted against humanity 3 years ago no longer existed as organized civilizations. The survivors looked very different from the proud beings who had once demanded human withdrawal. Elder Vixtar of the Kalari sat in the front row, his blue skin marked with scars from the wars. His once tall posture was bent with exhaustion. Beside him sat what remained of the Thornian leadership, their rocky bodies cracked and worn. "Before we begin," Bay said, his voice carrying easily through the silent chamber, "I want to remind everyone how we reached this point. 3 years ago, you voted to remove humanity from galactic affairs. You declared our involvement unwelcome and unnecessary. You got exactly what you asked for." He gestured to a display screen that showed images from across the galaxy. Ruined worlds, burned cities, refugee camps stretched to the horizon, graveyards that held billions of the dead. "This is what the galaxy looks like without human oversight," he continued. "This is the independence you demanded. If you want something different, it will be on humanity's terms entirely." A weak voice called out from the audience. "Supreme Chancellor, we acknowledge our mistakes. We formally apologize for our actions 3 years ago. We were wrong to remove human peacekeepers." The speaker was High Commander Theklon of what remained of the Vrex Empire. The proud warrior who had once refused to apologize was now a broken being leading the scattered survivors of his people. His empire had shrunk from hundreds of worlds to a few refugee ships. "We accept your apology, High Commander," Bay replied. "But apologies are not enough. The galaxy has proven it cannot govern itself. Peace cannot be maintained through committees and negotiations. It requires clear authority and the will to enforce it." Grand Admiral Nam Yunji stepped forward to explain the new military structure. She was younger than the previous generation of human commanders, chosen specifically because she had no emotional attachment to the old system. Her loyalty was to the new order. "The Terran Peace Corps will be expanded to 10 times its previous size," she announced. "Human ships will patrol every major trade route. Human commanders will have authority over all military forces of member species. Human law will supersede local law in any matter affecting galactic stability." A murmur ran through the chamber. Even in their defeated state, some representatives struggled with the implications. They were being asked to surrender not just their independence, but their sovereignty. "Supreme Chancellor," called out a representative from the Aquatic Collective, "surely some local autonomy can be maintained. Our internal affairs—" "Your internal affairs led to the poisoning of 50 ocean worlds," Bay interrupted. "Your local autonomy resulted in the deaths of billions of your own people. No, internal affairs that affect other species are now human concerns." Reconstruction. Director Ko Tae-young took the podium to outline the economic provisions. The galaxy's trade networks had collapsed completely during the wars. Entire species had been cut off from vital resources. Famine and disease had spread unchecked. "All trade disputes will be resolved by human arbitrators," Ko explained. "All major shipping routes will be managed by human logistics teams. All resource allocation between species will be determined by human economic planners." He activated a holographic display showing the proposed reconstruction timeline. "We estimate 15 years to rebuild basic galactic infrastructure. 25 years to restore pre-war economic levels. This will only be possible under unified human management." The representatives listened in silence. They had no choice but to accept. Their alternatives were extinction or continued chaos. The galaxy had tried independence and failed catastrophically. "What guarantees do we have?" asked Elder Vixtar hesitantly. "How do we know humanity will not abuse this authority?" Bay's expression remained calm, but his words carried absolute finality. "You have the guarantee of 3 centuries of human peacekeeping before you rejected our help. You have the guarantee of our response when you begged us to return. We didn't conquer you. We didn't invade your worlds. We simply let you experience the consequences of your choices." He walked to the chamber's viewing window, looking out at the space around New Geneva Station. Human ships patrolled in perfect formations, their presence a visible reminder of the power that maintained galactic peace. The old system failed because it was based on the illusion of equality, he continued. Beings pretended that all species were equally capable of maintaining peace, equally wise in their decisions, equally committed to the common good. 3 years of war proved that illusion false. The new system is based on demonstrated competence. Humanity has proven its ability to maintain galactic peace. Other species have proven their inability to do so. The new order reflects that reality. The signing ceremony began. One by one, the surviving species placed their marks on the galactic accord. They signed away their independence, their sovereignty, their right to make decisions that affected others. In exchange, they received peace, protection, and the promise of reconstruction. Some signed eagerly, grateful for any chance to save their people. Others hesitated, their pride warring with their desperation. But all of them signed. The alternative was extinction. As the last signature was added, Bay returned to the central podium. The Galactic Accord is now in effect. Humanity accepts the burden of galactic leadership that you have placed upon us. We will govern wisely, but we will govern absolutely. Grand Admiral Nam immediately began issuing orders. All surviving military forces will report to human commanders within 7 days. All trade routes will be reopened under human escort. All refugee populations will be relocated to designated reconstruction zones. The transformation was immediate and total. Species that had once debated for months about simple trade agreements now watched humans make decisions in minutes. Conflicts that had raged for years were ended with single commands. The chaos that had consumed the galaxy began to recede as human authority imposed order. Reconstruction. Director Ko activated his team of human administrators. They spread across the galaxy like a healing force, rebuilding shattered worlds, restoring broken economies, reconnecting isolated populations. The galaxy began to function again, but now as a single organism under human control. Director General Lee Tae-ho, the former ambassador who had walked out of the old council chambers 3 years ago, stood in his new office overlooking the restored galaxy. Through his window, he could see ships moving in orderly patterns along safe trade routes. Worlds that had been burning were now rebuilding. Species that had been at war were now working together under human supervision. "Was it worth it?" asked his aide, looking at the casualty reports from the 3 years of chaos. Lee considered the question carefully. Billions had died. Entire civilizations had collapsed. The galaxy had paid a terrible price for its lesson in independence. "Ask me in 50 years, he said finally, when the generation that remembers the wars is gone, when peace under human authority is simply the natural order, when no one questions whether humanity should lead because they've forgotten what happens, when we don't." He turned back to his desk, where reports from across the galaxy waited for his attention. Trade disputes to resolve, territory boundaries to establish, resource allocations to approve. The same work human administrators had done for centuries, but now with absolute authority instead of reluctant cooperation, the galaxy was at peace again. But it was a peace that existed entirely at humanity's discretion, enforced by humanity's power and maintained by humanity's wisdom. The species that had once feared human influence now lived completely under human control. Humanity hadn't just returned to the galactic stage. They had become its sole director, its ultimate authority, its unquestioned ruler. The galaxy had learned what it was like without human leadership. They would never forget that lesson again.